Hi, my name's Nefer Kefri. I am your hostess with the ghostess, and welcome to True Tales of the Paranormal. If you like what you see, I ask that you subscribe, give the video a like, and above all, please drop a comment down below. Comments really help in getting videos out in front of new eyes. And if you have other favorite channels, comment on their videos too. It'll really help out those creators. So without further ado, here is today's true tale of the paranormal. Today's true tale of the paranormal occurred when I was 10 years old. So back in 1973. I lived in a 4-story house. We had a basement, the main first floor where my parents and I lived, the second floor that was divided into 2 small apartments, and then we had an attic. Now, my grandfather had lived in the apartment above us for my whole life up till that point. He retired down to San Antonio when I was 9. So that apartment was vacant, and because it was vacant, my parents said, well, you and your friends can play up there if you want to. So I lugged all my art supplies up there and a radio, and my friends and I would have a lot of fun up there. So one day, my friends and I are up there, and I was actually up there with my friend Jimmy. Jimmy figures in one of my other experiences about the Fae and about fairies. So you can check out that video here on my channel. I'll try to link to it here somewhere. It's a new channel. YouTube may not allow me to do that yet. I don't know. If not, I'll try to remember to link it in the description below. But Jimmy was over, and it was summertime, so we didn't have school. And we were running around up there. We were playing tag, and my parents were using the apartment for storage in the meantime, and then they were going to renovate it and then begin renting it out to tenants. So they had a bunch of boxes up there and some furniture odds and ends. And so when you went upstairs, it was a very small 3-room apartment. It was long and narrow, and there was a bedroom at the far end. Then there was the landing, and the landing shared stairs that went downstairs into my kitchen. And then past the landing was a long, narrow living room, and then there was a small kitchen, and then beyond that was the private entrance for that apartment from outside. So Jimmy and I were up there, and we were playing tag in and amongst the boxes, and we're running around and jumping over them, and he was it, so I was trying to keep away from him as long as I could without him tagging me, and I go running into the bedroom. Well, I came to a sudden full stop, and he crashed right into me, almost knocking me flat on my face. And I stopped because the room was now completely different. And my brain could not compute what was going on. And Jimmy was right behind me, and he's saying, what's the matter? What's the matter? And then he about gags. And I say to him, without looking behind at him, I say to him, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And then he says, what happened in here? Because my grandpa had left all his furniture there when he went down to San Antonio. So we were going to rent the place out as a furnished apartment once my parents did some renovations on it. So it had a queen-size bed up there. Well, the bed was now a twin size. Yeah. It shrunk from queen to twin. And the dresser that had been up along the right-hand side wall where my grandpa had always kept it was now in front of the only window in that room, and it was blocking the lower third of that window. And on top of the dresser was a pair of gray slacks, neatly folded, just sitting there. Now, my grandpa always wore gray slacks, but these slacks looked a lot smaller. Because at first I thought, what are Grandpa's pants doing in here? That was my first thought. Not how did the dresser move? How did the bed shrink? No, what are Grandpa's pants doing in here? Funny the way a kid's brain will work, And and Jimmy's like, what happened? What happened to the bed? Who moved the dresser? We've been up here the whole time. What's going on? And he was getting increasingly worked up, and he almost started to hyperventilate. And he says, we gotta tell your mom. So he turns around to run down the 5 steps of this landing to the second landing. And then there was a door that led down into our kitchen downstairs. He throws open the door and he goes running down there yelling for my mom, Olga, Olga, Olga. And he actually couldn't say Olga, my mom's name. He always called her Aga. So he's like, Olga, Olga, Olga. And mom's like, what's the matter, Jimmy? What's the matter? And I go running after him. And we tell her what we saw. And she just looks at the two of us like, what in the hell? And she kind of laughed a little bit. And she says, no, come on, kids, really? And we're like, yeah. Go on, go see. Everything up there, it's different. And she says, I'm going to go up and take a look. But if you guys are lying, I'm, no, we're not lying. So she goes up there. We stay downstairs because now we're scared because we know this is not something, that should happen. She comes back downstairs. She looks at us. She says, kids, there's nothing up there. Everything is just as it was, as it's always been. And we look at her like, are you kidding us right now? So now we're thinking she's lying. She's trying to gaslight us or something. We don't know. So we go running back upstairs to check. Everything's just like it always was. My grandpa's queen bed was back in there. The dresser was up along the right-hand wall where it should be. There were no gray slacks to be seen anywhere. I even went and opened all the drawers in the dresser looking for those gray slacks. I opened the closet. I looked in there for them, and they weren't there. We were at a complete loss as to how to explain what we saw, how we saw it, and why we saw it. Nothing would become clear to us until 15 years later. So remember, I'm 10 years old at the time that Jimmy and I see the room do its transformation. 15 years later, I am now 25. So is he. He's away at school. I'm away at school. I was studying at the University of California in Santa Barbara for my master's degree in anthropology. And my parents, in the intervening years, had been renting out that apartment to various tenants over the years. And, it's a tiny apartment, and we only rented to singles because really it was too small for a couple. And so they had a lot of turnover. That's what happens with some small apartments. People usually rent it on their way to a bigger apartment or waiting for a house or whatever, or getting married. A lot of them ended up getting married, moving elsewhere. So at the time I was in grad school at UC Santa Barbara, my parents were renting to a woman named Diane. And I didn't know Diane because, I was away at school. So I come home for summer break and I'm out in the front yard with my dog. And Diane comes walking down the driveway and onto the sidewalk, and she sees me, says hi, introduces herself, and we chit-chat for a few minutes, And she says, I'm going down to the store to get some cigarettes. I'm going out tonight. I'm going to have a good time. I said, hey, good for you, Whatever, And she was really nice. She was a pretty heavy smoker, but she was really nice in that she didn't smoke in the apartment, or if she did, she cracked open a window because it was an old house. The house was at this time, the house was around 80 years old. And so if she had been smoking like a chimney upstairs, we would smell it downstairs, and she knew we were all non-smokers. So she made a point. She went through effort not to smell up the place. So my parents and I always deeply appreciated that about her. She was considerate. And so she comes back with, a box of ciggies under her arm, and she goes on, says hi to me and goes back upstairs. I go in the house. I think nothing of it, right? It was a Friday night. So Saturday and Sunday roll around, just typical weekend, nothing out of the norm. Monday, same thing. Tuesday afternoon, our phone rings and my mom answers it. She picks it up. She goes, hello? Yes. Yes, that's right. what? And, from her tone and the yes, 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 I knew it was something official. It was something important. It wasn't anybody we knew, obviously. And then she says, well, I'm not sure. My husband and daughter are here. Let me ask them. She covers the mouthpiece. And she says, have either one of you seen Diane at all since since Monday morning? And Dad and I look at each other and we're like, Diane? And I'm like, I said no. And Dad said no. And then I said, but I saw her Friday. She told me she was going to be going out that night, having a good time. And Mom says, but that was Friday. And I'm like, yeah, it was Friday. Friday afternoon when I saw her. I was out front with my dog. I was out front with Desiree. She's like, oh, okay. So she uncovers the mouthpiece and says, sir, none of us have seen Diane since Friday. My daughter saw her Friday afternoon. And then Diane's boss tells my mom over the phone, which she then relayed to us after she hung up. He said Diane did not come into work that Monday, and she had not come into work Tuesday. And that we had been listed, her landlords had been listed as her emergency contact, because she had moved into town shortly before renting the apartment, and she didn't know anyone locally. And Mom and Dad kind of look at each other, and then Dad goes, oh no, I have a really bad feeling. And I'm like, oh, you think something happened to her? And Dad's like, I don't know, but I'm getting the master key and I'm going up there and checking on her. So, as landlords, they had a master key that would open both of those apartments. So he grabs it and he goes on upstairs, and I was going to go with him. He said, no, you stay down here. So I stayed downstairs. He goes up there, and I go in my bedroom, because my bedroom downstairs was directly underneath the two private entrances upstairs that led into those apartments. So if there had been any type of a verbal exchange up there, I cracked open the window, I'd be able to hear it in my bedroom. So I'm in there with my window open listening. And I can hear Dad knocking on the door. I hear him again. And then even louder, bam, 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 bam. Then I hear him, Diane, Diane. He's yelling through the door. No reply, no noise coming from within the apartment. So he unlocks the apartment and goes in. She's not there. No sign of her. So he comes walking back out. He goes downstairs. He tells my mom she's not up there. And Mom's like, what? And then I say to them, she said she was going out Friday night. I wonder if something happened to her Friday night and she never even made it home over the weekend. And, we didn't know. I mean, she was a quiet tenant. She didn't make much noise, hardly at all, pretty much an ideal tenant. And always paid the rent on time, was nice, and considerate about the cigarette smoking. That's for sure. And so my parents were like, what do we do now? Because she hadn't shown up at work in 2 days. And she always paid the rent on time. She always showed us that she was a nice and conscientious person. So my dad was like, I don't think it's like her to not show up to work for 2 days and not call them and let them know what's going on. And Mom's like, yeah, what do we do now? And Dad says, I don't know. Maybe we should just call the police and ask them, what could be done. Because she didn't have any family in town. And as far as we knew, she didn't really have any family, no one to really file a missing persons report. So my mom called the police and explained the situation. So they came to the house and they talked to all of us, and especially to me, because I've been the last known person to have seen Diane. And I explained to them exactly what I shared here in the video. We had some chit chat, and she said she was going to go get some cigarettes and go out that night and have a good time. And they're like, did she say where she was going? I said, no. And then my dad says, oh, I know from a guy at work He met her, he knew Diane, and he said Diane liked to go to the bars downtown and pick up men. And the cops were like, oh, really? Now we're getting somewhere. So they go off, right? Meanwhile, it's getting to be, kind of weird. I mean, Diane is still nowhere to be found. And Dad says, maybe she ran off with some guy. Oh, we didn't know. And so I'm not quite sure how much time went by. This was in the mid 80s. So, I've got to think back for that. But I want to say it was like a good week. And then the police come by again. And they tell us they found a woman's body in a dumpster behind one of the bars downtown. And she had no ID on her. And they looked over at my dad and they said, would you come down to the morgue and see if you could identify her? Because we had no pictures of Diane. There were no pictures of her in the apartment. My dad went down there and ID'd the body. It was Diane. Someone had killed her behind one of those bars. It was really, really horrible, and we were badly shooken up. So it was a really horrible situation. We were all so upset. And the cops didn't know what to do. There was no evidence to connect the crime to anybody in particular. She had spoken with a number of men in the bar that night, and the bartender wasn't of any help, and so they never figured out who did it. Now, Mom and I went up into her apartment to, clear it out, and she really didn't seem to have any next of kin, so we donated her stuff to Goodwill. And when we went up there to clean, in the years between, my parents had switched out that queen bed for a twin, so the twin was up there. And I had never been in the apartment after they rented it out to other people. Diane, or maybe it was a previous tenant and she didn't bother to move it, I don't know, either her or somebody else, had moved the dresser in front of the window. And not only that, but when my mom and I went up there to clean up the place, on top of the dresser, there was a pair of neatly folded women's slacks. They were gray. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized this was exactly what Jimmy and I saw 15 years previous. And I remember turning to my mom and grabbing her arm and going, Mom, look. And she's looking, she's like, so? Because she didn't remember the incident, but I sure as heck did. And then I reminded her of it, and she looked at me, her mouth moved, no sound came out. And then she looked around at the room, and then she asked me, is this exactly what it looked like to you and Jimmy? And I said, I can't speak exactly for Jimmy, but I know for me, yes, this is exactly what the room looked like. And she shook her head and she said, you and Jimmy somehow together saw into the future. But how could you both see the same thing? I said to her, I don't know. And we never could explain it. It was just one of those really bizarre occurrences in life that you just kind of have to shake your head over. There was no way to explain it. Everyone was at a loss, So what do you think happened? How do you think Jimmy and I had this vision that ended up being a reality 15 years later? I don't know. Now, at the time it happened, when I explained to Jimmy what was going on, he thought that he and I had some sort of a shared premonition. He and I, growing up, had been really close. We kind of lost touch after we graduated high school, but as kids, we were always really close at finishing each other's sentences and stuff. He thought, I think we had a shared premonition, and we saw the same thing. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think that's possible. I said, I don't know. What could have happened? So another 20 years or so go by. I'm in a completely different setting. I'm at a house in Louisiana outside of New Orleans when I had a very similar, very bizarre experience. And then it hit me. A possible explanation for what Jimmy and I saw. That somehow, some way as kids, something happened, some sort of weird fluke in the time-space continuum, and he and I somehow slipped into another time stream. Perhaps it was another dimension. I don't know. But that somehow we had gone from the time period of when we were 10 years old to the time period of when we were 25 years old. And that we saw that upstairs bedroom apartment the way Diane had it fixed, instead of the way my grandpa had left it when I was 9. I still don't know, but based on the other experience I had years and years later, that's what I'm thinking must have happened. And somehow we jumped timelines or fell into another dimension. And then somehow, thankfully, we managed to pop out of it. I really don't know. I'm at a total loss. What do you think happened? What's your theory as to how Jimmy and I could have seen something that was not to occur for another 15 years? Your guess is as good as mine. Thank you for watching. This has been Nefer Kefri of True Tales of the Paranormal. If you like what you saw, I ask that you please hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and the bell notification so you're notified each time I post a video. I post every Wednesday at 12 noon. If there's a change, if something comes up, I will post about that under the community tab. Thanks a lot for watching. And again, a very hearty welcome to all the new subscribers. Welcome to the family. And until next time, wishing you a wonderful day ahead.